Toxic Avenger. This was my first commission for a movie poster back in 1984. I was introduced to Tromaville, or Troma, by a former classmate, Joe Ritter, who was a scriptwriter and cameraman. In fact, Joe went on to have a very interesting career, working with the likes of Francis Ford Coppola, Quentin Tarantino, and working on numerous cult movies. And Joe Ritter also wrote the script for Toxic Avenger. A very impressive resume. Joe introduced me to Loyd, Kaufman, and Michael Herz, president and vice president, respectively, of Troma. They were a colorful pair. Loyd was very animated, and Mike was very subdued. They played the good cop, bad cop scenario whenever I saw them. Mind you, this was 15 or so years prior to computers being a mainstay in the office. So you had to physically go down, or in this case, go up to the office, which was in Hell's Kitchen, to give them a preview of any progress report that I had, or any update on what I was working on. What added to the comedy, which was a very much of a boot camp experience. And let me just say, I'd be remiss in not thanking both Mike and Loyd for giving me a shot. But what would add to the comedy would be that whatever I came to show them, and they're going back and forth with it, they would call in the receptionist. The running joke was that the receptionist was a different person every time. I never saw the same receptionist twice in the couple of years that I was working with them. So they would call her in, let's say her name was Judy, and Loyd would be like, "Hey Judy, come in here and tell us what you think about this piece of work." And Judy would start talking like her opinion mattered. And I'd be like, "What the fuck, man? She's not going to be here by the end of the day. Why are we listening to this?" But, it was part of the atmosphere. So I was invited to a test screening of Toxic Avenger. And, my opinion of it, I'm just going to cut through it. These guys were known for making schlock coming-of-age movies, B-grade porkies, a lot of gratuitous sex, sophomoric humor, and, throwing a little bit of horror, blood and gore. Loyd had a famous quote of, "If you want art, go to the museum." To this day, I have no response for that. So this movie, Toxic Avenger, was supposed to be this upgrade into doing a more entertaining movie, or higher production values. I really didn't see that in what I saw, so I'm really thinking what I saw was a rough cut. But, and again, it really doesn't matter what I think, because the movie spawned multiple sequels, animated show, comic books. They really made a lot of money off of this franchise. And they even made an updated movie, which I'm quite sure they were not the production team behind, but I'm quite sure they were paid handsomely to produce or to sell the rights to the movie, if that's what they did. I asked, well, can I get some stills? Some movie stills to base on the illustrations for the movie, and they were vehemently against that. They were like, "No way." They had this shroud of secrecy over this movie. And I was very taken aback. So, again, this is prior to the computer, so you didn't have Photoshop and Google. Back then, you either had to buy magazines or go to the library, Midtown Library, where they had a photo section where you can take out pictures like you would books. And, that was the way it was back then. I had a fire hazard amount of magazines in my house, some of which I just bought for one or two images. And, that was just, back in the day. So, and there's a little backstory to the poster. The one that you see, the theatrical release, was actually the second poster. The first poster was this. And all of these images in here, all the images in here were from recollection of the movie. You know, no image in here is from the movie, but it's based on what I recall from the movie. And the second poster was, they actually gave me a test shot of a guy wearing the Toxic Avenger mask holding a mop. You know, he wasn't muscular, but he looked athletic. But you know, I kind of beefed him up for the poster, which they loved. The second one they loved. The first one, I commonly refer to this as God awful. I know you're not supposed to use God's name in vain, but this is the type of work I was producing back then. It was just unimpressive. I didn't come into my own until about 15 years later when I was working on my own clothing line, Give Me Face, which I'll get to later. But this is it. So, you know, Toxic Avenger was, it's given me a little bit of notoriety. I've had people contact me that I don't know in the past, you know, decades, asking about Toxic Avenger, or asking me, are you the artist who did Toxic Avenger? And, you know, it's flattering, you know. It's a cult phenomenon, I guess, if you want to call it that. And, you know, and that's it. But again, I got to thank Loyd and Mike for giving me the chance, and it's on to the next. Peace.